James Lipton's Inside, Chapter 6, page 143. A triumph, but then some of the fees grew restless. The plan had been explained to them, but they were, after all, professionals. They'd been paid for full value for their time, and they weren't giving full value. A true professional considers lack of interest an insult, and these professionals were no different in that regard from, well, say, actors. They began to want to be noticed. They began to coquette, and finally, to my horror, they began to ask the classic question, "Tu viens, chérie? Coming, darling?" And they would nod toward the stairs. There wasn't an extra franc in it for them, but there is such a thing as professional pride. I hurried to intervene, but my guests were enjoying the attention, and most of them were French. Still, no one accepted the invitation, that is, no one French. Suddenly, one of the Americans headed for the stairs with a delighted girl on each arm. Her husband, who was elsewhere in the room, smiling at the blandishments of a pool, gasped and headed her off with a hoarse, "What are you doing?" "Well, I thought," she began blithely, but his withering glance cut her off and sent the fees flying. And watching the drama unfold, I wondered whether, if he'd come alone to the party, he might have ventured up those stairs. The party ended without further incident and to great acclaim, and the fact that these words are appearing on these pages means that Barbara Walters gave me permission to include them. I'm not sure what would have happened to her upstairs, but I'm absolutely convinced that it was the insatiable journalist, not the insatiable woman, who wanted to sample a new experience. Barbara's intrepidity that night is one of several reasons, the others will be revealed later, why she is one of the heroes of my life. Sometimes the past just won't go away, which may mean that it shouldn't. In the summer of 2002, my production team and I embarked for Paris to shoot 2 episodes of Inside the Actor's Studio at the Opéra Comique. One with Juliette Binochet, the other was Jean Miro. We began the trip with a survey of Paris, to the scenic spots I recommended for B-roll and my intros. On this occasion, I was the stranded tour guide, leading my troupe to the Champ de Mars with its incomparable view of the Eiffel Tower, to the butte of Montmartre with its panoramic view of Paris, to the Quai de la Tournelle for the best view of Notre Dame's flying buttresses. But Christian Barcelos, the Bravo executive responsible for our show, kept pestering me for the other tour, the one to the environs I'd hinted at in the Julia Roberts episode. Finally, when we'd run out of locations to scout, with the hours of summer sunshine still on tap, I directed our driver to Pigalle, where we disembarked for a walking tour of the famous street. The fronts of the buildings had changed. There was much more chrome and neon, and the pools were stacked in picture windows like puppets, tapping on the glass with their long painted nails and beckoning us inside. The Station de Metro was finally gone, and even from the outside my former haunt was unrecognizable. As we made our way back to the corner where our driver waited next to the car, we passed the cavernous bar where the male stars of our exhibitions used to hang out, waiting for a call. The chasseurs on the sidewalk shrilled at us, inviting us into the bar. As we proceeded to the left, I felt a restraining hand on my arm. It was the chasseuse who had darted forward to grab me. She peered up at me for a long moment, studying me intently, and finally queried, "Tu achetais où tu vends?" "What did she say?" my companion asked, as I detached myself and approached the car. "Ask him," I said, jerking a thumb at our bilingual driver, who was grinning broadly. "You buying or selling?" the driver chortled. "Once a mec, always a mec," Christian observed with undisguised pleasure as we drove away from Pigalle. In the car I was silent, lost in thought, reflecting that in the year 2002 sex for sale had become wholly anomalous. I learned that it was never, by any stretch of the imagination, romantic. But I tried to persuade myself, for Regine it was intended as a means to an honorable inn outside the milieu, and for me it had afforded a reprieve when I needed it, a genuine adventure, without harmful consequences that I knew of. Was I rationalizing? Diligently, even comforting myself with the thought that Rimbaud ended his life as a rich gun runner in Africa, and Wallace Stevens was the vice president of an insurance company? One does, I told myself, what one must, and there are more grievous sins than a brief stint in the milieu. Flawed reasoning, I dare say, but it was all I had at my disposal on that pensive drive across Paris. Of one thing I was certain. The world had changed so radically that a party like the one I'd given in the 60s was now unthinkable. Prostitution in any guise and every respect had become simply dreadful and unconscionable in every corner of the globe, including, of course, Paris. As my mind raced back and forth between past and present, I recalled that, even then, in my salad days and Regine's on the Rue Pigalle, there were times when the fees lurched into the bar with horror tales that made even the seasoned troupe blanch.